Okay, hello and welcome back to Effing with the Ineffable. I am Zoe.
And I am Smokey Piggleton, and this is Oscar.
That is Oscar, his doggy.
And,
Smokey
and
Piggleton.
just as a preliminary, no animals were harmed in the making of this show.
I didn't even think. Yeah, we're talking about animals today, and Oscar is an animal.
Oscar,
As our
as am I.
exactly. I was gonna say, as are we. And
Yeah.
if you notice, I worked diligently to make a new logo for our show, and you can see that we're monkeys trying to reach the face of God. So we're all kinds of animals, but yeah.
As Father Dan said, we're just spiritual infants sitting on God's lap saying, "Goo."
Pretty much. So what's been going on with you?
Oh, not too much. Still haven't done any actual work. Got my second COVID shot, so I'm now 95% protected.
And apparently,
It,
I
it
didn't
was
know.
weird, and the four of us got the shot
Okay.
at the office.
When was this? Like, how many days ago?
This was on Wednesday, 2 days ago.
Okay.
And yesterday, I was the only one who felt good enough to kind of hang out at work all day.
Really?
The other two didn't come at all, and one came for a while and then felt like he wanted to go home.
Yikes.
Of course, there's not a lot to do, so it makes it
That's
easier
true.
to say, "Yeah, what's the point?"
So if you just like don't go into work, like those people, did they have to take like a sick day, or are they just
Yeah, they got to take a sick leave or something, which I think actually in the context of the shot, you can take a, you can, there's extra sick leave that's available in case you have any
because
reactions or
people have
whatever.
been getting sick from
The
it?
only thing I had was kind of a sore arm.
Yeah.
That was it. So
Well, that's good. I hope
I sold
nothing
I
develops.
sold the old van.
Yeah. Was it
Yeah.
that one family who had wanted it before, or was it somebody else?
Yeah, right. Yeah, they were really eager.
Good.
So
That's good.
we gave them a little bit of a deal just because they seem to have,
Needed it.
yeah, they seem to be in more need of it than we were. So there's my Lenten chair. There's my Lenten charity,
Your almsgiving.
my almsgiving.
You have one down and two left that you're trying to sell.
Yeah, trying to sell a couple more cars. And Craigslist, I'm getting scammers. Did Mom tell you that we were?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we got a couple different people. One person sent me a check in a different off a different person's account for, I was asking for $2,500 for the car. They sent me a check for 4,000, and then were
Oh,
wanting me
wanted
to
1,500 back.
wanting me to cash that and give them the cash back.
Oh. So what did you do? Did you even cash it, or did you just?
I didn't cash it. I just said, I just want to check for the amount, and whatever you want to pay your pickup people, you can pay them on your own. That
Yeah.
doesn't need to be part of my deal.
Yeah. That is
But
that's a classic scam. Like,
yeah, I
paid
expect
too
that
much and
check
you
was,
can.
yeah, I expect that check was no good.
Yeah, that's what would be my guess too. Oops, sorry. Let me move this back. Yeah, my kids are very excited because you and the family decided you're gonna try to come visit us at some point, and you haven't been to visit us since we moved to the DC area. So
Right.
that's pretty
Yeah.
exciting. Around Easter time, so maybe we'll have some in-person recording.
Yeah.
We'll have to see how much. I don't know how long you guys are planning on coming, but that would be fun.
At least for yeah, at least for a few, maybe 5 days.
That's
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 long
like
enough.
10 episodes. Just kidding.
That's long enough for us to get on your nerves.
Nah, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It'll be long enough for us to get on your nerves. That's for sure.
You already are. Oh,
Do you have any other news or updates? Since
not really.
yeah, I don't really have. Trying to think. We've just kind of had a busy week. It's funny because last week we recorded 2 episodes because the weather was so terrible. And now this week the weather has been so nice. We've been running around in literally like short sleeves. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I went out and walked Oscar this morning with just this shirt on.
Yeah.
No jacket or anything. So yeah, it's a little overcast here today. But,
Yeah, it's a little cold here, but and it's supposed to be warm this weekend but rain the whole time, which is kind of annoying, but I'll take it over cold and rainy, which is what it had been. So, should we get into our topic?
yes.
This is a rare topic for me.
We chose a topic today.
This was a requested topic. This is a rarity for me because I usually have strong opinions on everything. And I am kind of undecided on both the political aspect of this topic and the moral / religious / philosophical aspect. But we are talking about animal rights and treatment of animals, kind of that whole that whole topic today.
Right.
So we were requested to speak about animal rights from a libertarian perspective and a Catholic perspective. I think of it just more as like kind of the legal side of things. What should the law have to say about animal rights? And then morally, what are like our duties and responsibilities in terms of like animal rights? Should we start by talking about the legal side of things?
Yeah, I guess that'll, anywhere we start, we're gonna get to,
Yeah.
we're gonna go through a certain process, I think.
Yeah. So, my dad did send me an article about kind of a libertarian view of animal rights. I did not like that article. I thought it was not well argued, not well reasoned at all. I found it very annoying, actually. But it gave me some good like points of thought. And this is something like my husband and I argue about. This I think maybe kind of got brought up because either last episode or 2 episodes ago we were talking about how I've been vegetarian since middle school. I think I've now been vegetarian longer than I wasn't vegetarian, because I'm 27 and I think I went vegetarian when I was like 13. So I think I've been vegetarian for like 14 years or something. And I haven't been totally strict the entire time. Like in my second pregnancy, I actually really craved meat, which is very weird for me because normally I don't crave, and actually a little bit in my first pregnancy too. So both of those times I would eat meat occasionally, but when I'm not pregnant, I don't usually desire to eat meat at all.
Well, your second child is a Viking. I'm not surprised.
She is, and it's funny because she actually, like, my husband eats meat and I don't, but when my husband eats meat, she asks for it all the time. Like, she wants to eat it too. And with my first, I was pretty strict about not wanting her to eat meat. And this time, I don't really want to get into like the health benefits of eating meat versus not eating meat, although I have a lot of thoughts on that. Like, I actually do think that for some people, eating meat is important for your health. And I think that my health has changed a lot since first becoming pregnant. And I think now, like, if I ate meat, I do think I would be a healthier person. I think there's something about my body that, and maybe it's just pregnancy and breastfeeding in general, because that takes such a toll on you. But I do think that I would be healthier if I ate meat, but I have a really hard time doing that because just taste wise, I have no interest, and morally I'm kind of turned off of it. But I don't know how much we want to talk about that.
Do you think that the moral repugnance of it adds to your
Distaste?
Yeah, that you just don't don't want to like it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's like a self-perpetuating cycle. Like the I
A
it I have a yeah
self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah
It's like,
I have a
this is decadent, and I don't want to like this, so I'm not gonna
I
do
have a
it.
hard time separating, even when it's like cooked in front of me. I have a hard time separating that out from like this was an animal. Whereas I think a lot of people who eat meat just probably don't think about that, because if they think about it,
If you eat chicken nuggets, it's
it's pretty far removed.
unrecognizable. It's unrecognizable as chicken.
Yeah. And I should say I do eat fish. I think fish is probably the best food for you that you can eat. Fish and eggs. That's my theory. Fish and eggs are the two best foods that you can eat.
But
Um,
see, those are animals.
but yes, and I know, but I have pretty strict standards for the fish that I buy. I only buy wild caught fish because and a lot of the reason that I don't want to eat meat is not because I just don't think that you should ever kill an animal to eat. I actually don't really have a problem with like hunting if you're gonna eat the animal. Um, it's the factory farming and like the large, just like the mistreatment of the animal during its lifetime that I have the problem with. It's not really like the killing of it, which I mean, we're gonna like make all the vegans mad, the vegetarians mad, the meat eaters mad in this episode, but you can leave your comments below if you want to yell at me about it.
We'd appreciate them.
So
See, my problem is more, yeah, I think we treat animals as though they're ours to treat.
yeah,
We treat them like property, like
objects to use.
slaves, like
Yeah.
like something to be used and not something to be loved.
Yes.
Clearly, but how do we make that? I guess my question always comes back to, how do you make that distinction between animals and humans? How
So
can you
yeah,
say that humans are worthy of protections and rights and should not be treated as slaves or as material or as property, and yet we enslave animals and we kill them and eat their bodies?
yeah.
We wouldn't think of, well, unless you're Army Hammer, you wouldn't think of doing that to another human being. Right? So why? On
So
what
okay,
on what basis do we make that ethical distinction?
yeah. So I think this gets a lot into the problem is the legal question and the philosophical question can't really be divided. So
Right.
I was talking to my husband about this. My husband is very much of the mind that like he likes animals a lot, and he doesn't think you should be cruel to animals, but he doesn't think that animals should have any legal protection. Once again, he says the question well, here's the question that we always need to ask when we're talking about any legal question. What is the proper role and scope of government? The proper role and scope of government is to protect the rights of its citizens. And clearly animals, as we currently view it, animals are not citizens. And so they fall outside that.
We want suffrage for Oscar.
I don't.
Oscar
I don't.
Oscar says, what's that? He wants to make America great again.
Oh.
What's that? You don't like how Joe Biden pets you without asking permission? I've heard that.
But so I do believe that that's true. I think that having the one role of the government is protecting the rights of its citizens. So I don't think that animals should be considered citizens. Now, does that mean that animals shouldn't have any rights at all? That's debatable, obviously.
They have been afforded some rights, the rights to not be treated cruelly and not to be neglected.
Yeah.
There are laws on the book that you can't treat animals cruelly.
Yes, but I guess the question is, should that exist in a libertarian, from a libertarian mindset, should there be legal protections for animals.
How much more cruel can you get than killing something and eating it? I mean, when you say, you know,
Yeah.
like it's like the misnomer of like a humane killing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's oh, well, I suppose there's some killings that are more pleasant from the point of view of the killer than others, but from the point of view of
Killed.
of the, of the chicken, I don't know if he cares if you chop his head off or if you run him over with a car, or it all ends up the same way, right? Run him through a chipper.
I mean, morally now speaking, I do think there's a difference. I think that there is a difference between somebody who raises their chickens in a way where they're actually caring for them and giving them a good life, and then ending their life and using them for food. Like, do I think that's like the best thing to do? Not necessarily. I think that if you can not eat animals for food, it's probably better to not do so, because any way that you're gonna, unless you're eating roadkill or something, anytime that you eat an animal, you're gonna be inflicting pain and suffering on something that can feel pain and suffering. Now then people make the whole argument like, okay, but you kill plants when you eat them, but like, I think there's a gradation of pain, ability to feel pain, ability to be sentient and aware of like what is happening. And that's actually partly why I eat fish. I do think fish have less awareness of what's going on. If a fish is just swimming along one day and then gets caught in a net and is brought up, like, do I think that it suffers a lot? Probably for a bit, but not too much. I think it has a pretty happy life. This is such a complicated thing. It's just like,
It is complicated because the sentience and the rationality is usually used as a basis for making that distinction.
yeah.
However,
Yeah.
aren't there some, basically, I mean, is somebody in a coma?
Yeah.
Not, are they free game? They don't need their legs.
Yeah.
Can I eat their legs?
I was gonna, so that's part of, this is part of what I was gonna get into. So I was gonna say, I just thought about this and I made some notes. So, animals are not citizens and therefore fall outside the scope of government, but this brings up two questions. First of all, what makes somebody a citizen? And along with that question, what makes somebody have rights, right? Like what is the requirement for having any rights at all? And number two,
Oscar was born in America. He's naturalized.
Do we have a duty to treat animals in any particular way? So as far as the first question, I had to Google this and talk to my husband about it. This is what it says in the Constitution about what makes somebody a citizen. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. This is the 14th Amendment, the first section 1, and it's the first clause of that, I believe. I'm just saying that from memory, so if I'm wrong.
That's the definition of citizenship. That's the standard of citizenship.
Yes, but obviously there is room for there's vagueness in that statement, right? What all persons, okay, what is a person? Who gets personhood? Like, once again, that's the argument for abortion, right? That infants in the womb are not persons. That's another, we are already seeing a mass genocide of people with Down syndrome, with certain genetic predispositions that are getting aborted in utero because we obviously think they're either not persons or their lives aren't worth living for whatever reason, and even so there's a lot of people.
And as the killer, we can say that.
Exactly.
But But as the victim, they can't say squat until they're born. I think
Yeah.
if you ask people, I think if you ask people with Down syndrome, are you glad to be alive? The vast majority of them would say, yeah.
And people, I mean, there's all kinds of like, videos of people with Down syndrome speaking at pro-life events, and they're saying like, my life has dignity, my life has value. Like,
Well, in China and in I believe in India and a lot of other places,
yeah,
there's abortions just because there's limitations on the number of children you can have, and people want to have male children,
yeah,
so they kill their female children.
yeah. Sex-selected abortions are
Yeah,
common in a lot of places.
and I mean, it used to be that they would just abandon female
Yeah.
children out in the woods.
Yeah,
In the Game of Thrones, it's the boy children
yeah.
who who Caster Craster or whatever his
Yeah.
name is, that nasty old dude.
Ugh.
You sacrificed him to the White Walkers.
Yeah,
But that's people make ethical decisions based on their perception of uh, other people's rights and dignity, in ways that really are not consistent and are not very defensible, really.
yeah,
And so that's why I think this is an important subject to discuss. I do agree with you that there's a lot of ambiguity, and I have a lot of ambivalence about it. Uh, if I had to say, oh, I'm going to save Oscar, or I'm going to save one of my kids or grandkids, or even one of the neighbor kids, I'd have to let Oscar go. I don't value non-human life as highly as I value human life.
yeah,
But does that mean that they don't have some value?
yeah.
And does that mean that they can be just um, used and completely dominated?
Yeah. So I think that's definitely a lot of the Catholic view of this. Like, I don't know if we want to just get into that now, or if we want.
Yeah, let's.
But so I think once again, my dad sent me an article about Pope Francis's encyclical on kind of the environment. It's called Laudato Si, right? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Which is kind of based on the prayer of the Canticle of the Sun from Saint Francis, which I love that hymn, and we actually have sang that hymn in our homeschool. But so I'll just read some quotes from the encyclical. The Pope reminds us, we read in the Gospel that Jesus says of the birds of the air that, quote, not one of them is forgotten before God, Luke 12:6. How then can we possibly mistreat them or cause them harm? So obviously we have a duty to care for God's creation. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that experimentation on animals is morally acceptable only if it remains within reasonable limits and contributes to caring for or saving human lives. Human power has limits, and that it is contrary to human dignity to cause animals to suffer or die needlessly. Yeah, we have dominion over the animals. That God in Genesis gives Adam dominion over the animals, but that does not mean domination, right? And how do we define dominion, and how do we define the scope of what that is, and how do we get into the proper way to act around animals?
And not only what rights do we have to interact with them in certain ways, but what responsibilities do we have toward the whole of creation?
Yeah.
And I mean, we were placed here as stewards. We're not the owners of the world. We're the stewards of the world. This is God's world. This is God's creation. He gave it to us to take care of. Are we taking care of it in a way that brings honor and glory to Him? I mean, there's certain qualities about animals. I mean, anima means spirit.
Yeah.
So animals have some kind of spirit. They may not have the capability of having a so-called soul
Yeah.
with free will and reason and all all that stuff that we
Yeah.
talk about as being parts of parts of the human reflection of God's qualities, but they do have some degree of that.
Yeah.
I know that I know that Oscar certainly has consciousness of a lot of things and is definitely has affection for certain things,
Mom.
um, especially mom, right?
Whenever she leaves, he just sits and whines at the window waiting for her to come back.
Right. Um,
So
so
clearly he can feel, he has somewhat of like emotional states, right? He can
right.
feel happy when he sees her. He can feel sad when she goes away, or anybody. He feels
So
happy when he sees,
he is sentient in
yeah,
that regard.
yeah.
Um,
Does he have
but I get now
reflection?
you asked the question before, why is it okay to kill plants? That was a that's been a question that's been raised too. Do plants have sentience? Does water have sentience?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that um, those pictures from like the Secret Life of Water or whatever that I've got a book. This Japanese yeah, here's Oscar. You want him? You want to go buy Oscar, Mom? You want to
Is
go
it,
buy Mama? She doesn't have food.
is it about the whole like ice crystals and the way they form?
Yeah, crystals that were in the presence of being cursed
Yeah.
were ugly crystals. They
Yeah.
were misshapen. They were asymmetrical, and just
I
did
know.
not full.
Do you like believe that that's true? I have a hard time. That just seems like so. I mean, I'm not saying it's not true. I'm just saying it
It's
seems
it's it's
so.
basically it's basically a question: is there power in prayer? Is there a spiritual power that we can't necessarily sense
Yeah.
because we're too dull and gross, but is it there and is it active
Yeah.
even on a micro level, even on a material level?
Yeah.
Not,
Even to
you
water, not
know,
just to other
does
people.
does the spiritual plane interact with the material plane in some way? These micrographs of these ice crystals um, are really pretty remarkable. I don't know if that's been replicated. I don't know if that's you know legit or
Scientific.
not. But it's an interesting question because that means should we be drinking water?
But then I
does
mean, yeah.
does the water that we're drinking, we used to make a joke about the taqueria. They have tongue tacos.
Mm,
Can,
yeah.
can the tongue can the tongue taco taste you tasting the tongue taco?
So this
But
brings up
can
two.
the water be affected by does the water help me if I'm in a spiritual state where the water can help me? And will the water hurt me if I'm evil? If
Yeah.
I'm will the water uh, reconfigure based on my spiritual state?
Man, that is so weird because I don't know how far you are on Bible in a Year, but this is so freaky because just yesterday we were reading in Numbers. I think it's Numbers chapter 5. There's a part about um, if a husband is like jealous and suspects his wife of like being unfaithful, there's this like ritual in the Bible where the priest basically takes water and adds dust from the floor of the from the sanctuary to the water. So it's just water and dust and makes her drink it in front of everybody. But he puts all this like he puts all these like curses and blessings on the water, and he says like, if you've been unfaithful, like let this water curse you, and like basically your uterus will swell and you won't be able to have kids anymore. It's like a really weird thing. And if it's not, then just let it pass through you normally, because it's just water with dust, so you wouldn't think that it would be able to do anything. And so that was like the ritual for
not the water and dust that does anything.
Yeah.
It's the spiritual.
Yeah.
It's the prayers that are said over it.
Yeah, and he said like, it's interesting that, you know, we read that and we think, man, that's pretty barbaric, or like just, you know, kind of savage.
Magical thinking.
Yeah, but he said, think about it this way. He talks a lot about the +1 theory of knowledge in the Bible, how God has infinite wisdom, and humans at the time when he was speaking to them in the Bible had a limited amount of wisdom. Let's say they were at level 1.
They might have had some wisdom, but they didn't have much knowledge.
Yeah. But so they had basically level 1. So he was saying that God has to incrementally bring up our level of knowledge of how to act with each other. He can't just tell us how to perfectly act all the time from the beginning, or it would be so overwhelming, like we wouldn't be able to understand it.
You can't go from 0 to 60 instantly. You'll have whiplash.
So he was so he was saying basically in you know, before the Bible, if a man suspected his wife of being unfaithful, women were completely were completely subject to the whim of their husband. So if a husband wanted to kill his wife, there would be no repercussion for it. Now they're saying you can't.
That's what we call the good old days.
But now they're saying you can't just kill your wife, even if you suspect her of being unfaithful. You have to take her to the priest. The priest has to be the mediator. And not only that, but basically, if she was unfaithful, basically a miracle has to happen for it to be proved that she was unfaithful, right? Like water and dust have to make her have this like distended uterus and like have all these weird consequences as a result. Like that's basically a miraculous thing that has to happen. So God is saying,
or a psychological thing where her guilt manifests as some sort of somatic experience.
Yeah. But I thought that was so interesting. And then to talk about like the power of water, like because you're putting the curses on the water, I don't know, maybe that cursed water does have the power to effectuate change. Obviously, I don't think that like it's our human ability that's causing that curse, right? I think it's God ordaining like this is the manner in which this like ritual is going to take place. But I don't know. We've kind of strayed from
it's interesting because this Japanese fellow who does all these micrographs of the freezing water and the ice crystals did a lot of different experiments. He even had people like pray over it from a great distance.
Yeah.
Like and I don't remember all of it. I mean, I didn't study it in great detail, but I did find it somewhat fascinating. And it just begs the question, is the entire world created of consciousness?
Yeah.
To what extent is consciousness a quality that is in all matter, whether we recognize it or not?
Yeah.
I mean, we think, oh, stone's you're as dumb as a rock. Yeah, but are rocks really so dumb?
Yeah. You've seen
it asks a question that we really can't answer, that we really have not until more recently been able to answer, and we just assumed, rocks are dumb.
Yeah.
They have no animus. They have no spiritual capacity. But maybe they do. Maybe there's something to just the substrate of matter itself, that electrons and protons and nuclei and quarks and whatever, that all those things can be affected by spiritual activity, spiritual power.
But then once again, getting back to the idea of like animal rights, like, okay, let's say water and rocks and plants and animals and everything has a degree of sentience and consciousness. Like, we still need to eat, we still need to drink water. So it's like, we have to, even if I found out that plants are experiencing pain when I'm eating them, does that mean I just shouldn't eat anything at all? Like, I don't know that that's the right answer. I mean, once again, God does say we have dominion over things. Does that mean that we should try to inflict pain on them? No, I think actually the opposite. I think we should try as much as we can to respect the sentience and life and dignity of animals and plants and anything. We have
to honor the life of everything.
Yeah.
To honor the life, to honor that everything is part of God's creation, that this is our Father's world.
Yeah.
You know, and everything is fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah.
Not just humans.
Yeah.
Not just humans. I mean, that's speciesist.
Yeah.
You know, and I can understand a certain degree of speciesism. Like I said, I would certainly, you know, save any member of my species rather than Oscar. And I love Oscar. I think he's awesome.
Yeah. You do love Oscar. Yeah.
Huh?
I said, you do love Oscar. I've seen you play with him. You really love him. But yeah, it's hard because I think it kind of gets down to like, one of the notes I made was like, I think that one way we could view this is kind of like the non-aggression principle again. Like, if we think about it from the standpoint of the non-aggression principle, it's like, we want to do as little harm, as little violence, as little aggression, as little inflicting of pain on the world as possible, right? And I do think, like, I think that if you have to eat meat to survive, then there's nothing wrong with that. Because I do think that humans are...
I guess that's a question, though. Do you have to eat meat to survive?
I mean, clearly, I don't think right now... I mean, obviously, there's people in North Korea who are starving. If they see a rat on the ground, yeah, they should probably kill that rat and eat it because it's either that or they're going to starve. But, like, me in the US where I have a grocery store full of food in front of me, like, no, I don't.
Full of Impossible burgers.
Exactly. And it's funny because Ben Shapiro
you can get all that vegetable protein without having to ever kill an animal, and it's actually probably better for the environment in many ways to have more of a plant-based diet.
Yeah, it's
You
certainly.
know, if you're worried about global warming, apparently, like, cow farts are one of the worst.
Not just that, but the
worst offenders on the greenhouse gases.
Yeah, but not just that, but the grazing land that they use for animals totally destroys the environment. If you want to see a good movie about this, there's a documentary called Cowspiracy. I think that's what it's called. Cowspiracy, which is all about the environmental impact of eating animals. And yeah, if you're somebody who's like, we need the Green New Deal, we need to like have all electric cars, but you're still eating meat, I think you have a serious misunderstanding of the actual impact of like
there's a gap in your ethicality.
Yeah, because
you're not being completely aware of the ethical effects of all of your behavior.
I think it's like if you eat one hamburger a month, that's the equivalent. Like, one hamburger is the equivalent of like a month's worth of showers. Just the water that it takes to create that one hamburger, because it takes so much water to raise a cow, to water the land that you're using to feed that cow. I mean, it's...
So if I only take a shower once a month, then I can have an extra hamburger?
I don't know. You'll have to...
I would gladly shower Tuesday for a hamburger today.
So
do you know Wimpy from the Popeye?
no.
Oh, Wimpy was always trying to get the diner owner to give him a hamburger in advance. I
Oh,
will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
isn't that what we all want? So
Yeah, right. That's what we're all doing. We're all using the grandkids' money right now.
yeah, exactly.
Thanks,
So
grandkids, for the stimulus. When
I
the bill comes due, I hope it doesn't pinch too hard.
I think like circling back to like what we were talking about like what makes somebody a person, what makes somebody a citizen. Um, I do think that like we can't really answer this question from like a secular, purely like legal point of view. I think that when you're talking about what makes somebody a person, I think you always have to appeal to some sort of um non-legal standard, I guess. But I do think like ultimately what I believe is that what makes somebody a person is not their actual ability to have reason or rationality, but I do think it's the capability for that. Because we are human beings, we have the capability for reason, um, even if that's never realized in us. In
Even if
this,
we never exercise it.
yeah, well, and even if you're somebody who,
We could grow up and become real adults.
yeah,
We may not, but we could.
yeah,
The potential for actualized human existence is there.
yeah,
Whether it will ever be accomplished or not, there's a lot of different factors that are involved in that. We know it won't be accomplished if the life is ended,
yeah.
or at least we have strong reason to believe that dead people don't uh, don't have satisfying existences.
At least in this world, they certainly don't.
We haven't noticed. Well, that brings us back to the zombie factor, right?
Yeah. Um. So
Are zombies people too? Do zombies deserve love? Do zombies deserve?
do they deserve rights? And that brings me back
Do,
to another
do Trump supporters deserve equal protections under the law, even though they've demonstrated that they're clearly very
incapable of
faulted,
rationality.
that they have not grown up, and that they're not likely to?
Um. So this actually, it's funny. It brings me back to
I'm
when,
a Trump. I'm a deplorable, by the way. So I'm
yeah.
just being sarcastic here.
The only other like legal issue that I thought was interesting was here's another problem with, even if you want to ignore the whole thing of like personhood and citizenship and whatever, and just say animals should have rights whether they're persons or citizens or not. Here's the problem, and I think this is something that article that I will link below and that you sent me completely ignores. Rights always come along with responsibilities. You cannot have a right if you don't have a responsibility to protect that right and to use it well. Here's the issue. Animals are not held responsible for their actions. You can't bring an animal to court. Like if Oscar attacked,
The owners are. The
yes.
owners.
And that's where it gets complicated because once again, children aren't really held responsible. Like this is a whole
Their owners are. They're
yeah,
the
yeah.
owners of the children.
This is a whole topic that I actually think is really complicated and interesting, which is the idea of, do children have rights from a libertarian perspective? And even now, like, what are the rights of children?
Distinct from their parents' rights
Yeah.
to manage them.
Like, yeah, are there separate rights for children and adults? At what point do we grant? I mean, obviously, like, adults are allowed to vote, adults are allowed to
You're
own
right. It's
guns.
the same question. When do you qualify for full citizenship
Yeah.
and for full rights under the Constitution?
Because it's weird that children by that legal definition that I read from the Constitution, children are citizens, right? Children are persons born obviously assuming that they're born or naturalized in the United States. Children
are they persons though until they can have an agency of their own?
Well, and there's a lot of there's a lot of philosophical debate about this. I still remember in my philosophy classes in college, we would talk about like, because I took an existentialism class, and a lot of that is about like what it is to be a person. When you read Heidegger, he has strong views about what it is to be a person. Now, he was an actual Nazi, but he believed that like people with
But Nazis are persons too,
but
and
he
they
believed
deserve, and they need to be loved.
He believed that people who with like mental developmental delays and whatever were not persons. If I remember, I mean, this was like several years ago, so I might be getting that wrong. But as far as I remember,
Probably had questions about Jews too.
That's what I'm saying. So like that, when you start saying certain people don't count as a category of person, that's where you get stuff like abortion. That's where you start getting stuff like genocide. That's where you start getting stuff like people with Down syndrome, which is really a type of genocide.
What Homo sapiens do not qualify as persons?
Yeah.
That's the question you're asking now.
And this is, once again, I think this really is a philosophical question that can't really be answered from a purely secular legal kind of standpoint. I don't think. Like, I'd like to see somebody try. I haven't seen somebody do it convincingly. Besides just saying like the ability to reason or have rationality is usually the answer. But I mean, once again, that's where you get to the thing of, okay,
that's pretty lame
don't have the
because
ability.
you can teach rats how to run a maze, and they can figure out what's the right direction to go and what's the right button to push. Does that mean they're rational?
Yeah.
Are they able to solve problems? Are they able to reason their way through different situations? Yeah. Oscar's got a little ball that we put treats in, and he can figure out how to bat that thing around and get the ball rolling and get the treats to fall out. Is that rational? It's more rational than some people I know.
And I mean, like, it gets way more complicated when you start talking about stuff like dolphins and start talking about animals like elephants and even primates. I mean, primates are
pigs are apparently very bright, and yet I eat bacon.
Yeah.
As often, not on Fridays. Mom reminded me, I was about to make some sausage this morning, and Mom said, it's Friday. It's like, oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
I guess this pig carcass will have to, I guess I'll honor God by letting this pig carcass sit in the fridge for another day. That's
honor.
You're welcome, God.
So I just am seeing if I had any other notes. I guess so I do think that the question of if we give animals rights, what kind of responsibilities come with that? That's a question that's interesting in the sense that we don't hold animals accountable for their actions. But once again, we don't hold children always accountable for their actions, and at some point they have to be
but
at some
animals we assume are never going to be able to take responsibility.
Whereas children
children at some point we assume will.
Yeah.
We hope.
So
and that's and you're right, rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. If you handle whatever freedoms you have responsibly, you have the right to continue to exercise those freedoms. If you handle them irresponsibly, you end up in prison and you have to come see Smokey P. So
we don't have prison for animals, so that's a complicating factor.
Animals are all in prison.
Hey, remember that elephant that was hung for its crime? You should tell that story. This is like
In,
one of your
Ir-
favorite stories.
in Irwin, Tennessee, if you look it up on Wikipedia,
Don't
you
do it.
get
It's pretty sad.
you get to see Mary the elephant hanging from a railroad crane. Uh, yeah, and Mary was a circus elephant uh, who was went berserk. There was some unqualified fellow riding on Mary and whipping her, and apparently whipped her. She was having a tooth abscess, and he whipped her right on the tooth abscess a time or two too many, and she grabbed him off and stomped him. Basically, he killed him, squished him.
Honestly, that's just justice right there. Like, that makes me sick.
The guy didn't realize she had a tooth abscess. I mean, he
Don't
didn't
rip an
I
animal.
don't think he meant her any harm. He probably figured, hey, she's a huge brute animal. She doesn't, all she understands is the whip.
Well, that was his
Back in the
feeling.
back in the day, there's still a lot of people who think that way about
I
people.
know. I know.
But not just animals. They think that way about people.
I know.
So don't stand too harsh in judgment of the dude. He did get what was coming to him.
Yeah.
He got squished, and then they decided, oh, justice requires that Mary be hung now
Yeah.
because it's a life for a life.
Yeah.
Even though
Just
Mary,
animal.
yeah, and so I think it took a couple days to actually hang her because they couldn't actually they couldn't actually get her neck to break, so she just kind of
Oh,
hung there
stop! This is terrible.
and suffocated, kind of like Jesus on the cross. He didn't die. He died from suffocation because he was not able to uh, keep his lungs clear. Congestive heart failure is really kind of the cause of death, which
I
is
should cut all this out. This is terrible.
a brutal thing for a healthy young man to be put into a situation where he's whipped and exposed and then incapable because you put nails through his feet. He's incapable of keeping his lungs clear and taking a full breath.
Yeah.
Horrible death. Horrible.
Okay, let's move on to something else because this is really depressing me. Oh God, that story. Why did I even ask you to tell that? That's awful. But so
because it's true.
I mean, and it's relevant because the whole point was we don't hang animals typically for their crimes, right? Like
Usually, we hold their owners responsible. Yeah.
So I guess I don't know. Do I have any other points from like the legal?
Well, now let's talk a little bit about the Catholic because
well, hold on, wait. I have one more point that I wanted to make from the legal point of view, which is just the issue of neglect. Do we think there's obviously laws on the books now about you can't harm an animal, right? But my husband, we didn't look this up, but we're pretty sure that there's also laws in at least some states that you can't neglect an animal until it dies. And if you do, you'll be held legally liable for that.
You can't cage up like your animals. You can't chain up a dog and not feed it.
Yeah.
You can't keep a horse or a donkey or anything and not and not give it the ability to the things that it needs to live. If you're taking responsibility, you're also taking on the obligation of keeping it alive and keeping it from feeling undue stress and strain and distress.
Yeah. Like you can't leave your dog in a car on a hot day with the windows up, that kind of thing.
Right. Unless you leave your child in there to watch it. Kidding. That's a joke.
So I actually think there's a better legal argument like I still am really conflicted on the whole giving animals any quote unquote rights. I don't really like that whole idea. I think that we use rights as, I think rights has become like, I want something, therefore I have a right to it, like that in our common
I
parlance.
want health care. I have a right to health care.
Right to education, right to
You
health.
have a right to buy health care from anybody who's willing to sell it to you. I'll grant you
Yeah.
that.
And once again, we only, as libertarians, we only believe in negative rights. We don't believe that you have a right to the products or services of anybody else.
To make a claim on somebody else's
Yeah.
stuff.
You only have a right from, or a freedom from impingement on what is naturally given to you. I do think though that there's a better legal argument for neglect, in the sense that if you are voluntarily deciding to own a pet, just
Right.
like you're voluntarily deciding to raise a child, you're taking on the responsibility to care for that pet. And I do think that, like, if you fail in that responsibility, should there be legal consequences for that? I don't know. Should there be societal consequences? Certainly. I think people who neglect their pets are
Despicable.
evil. That's an evil act, and I think that you should be held responsible for it. Do I think that the law should necessarily hold you responsible? I don't know. But I guess that's like another aspect to consider. This is just a lot of like things that I've been thinking about this topic. It's not really a lot of answers, because I don't have a lot of answers. I'm still very conflicted on a lot of this stuff.
Well, again, like you said, the function of government, and I think we need to hold government within a very narrowly defined function. Otherwise, it expands like that. What's that great stuff? That stuff that you spray into a crack and it just fills everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what government tends to do. And if you don't keep it narrowly defined,
Yeah.
it's gonna overreach. Always with the overreach.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think the function of a government is to protect the citizens and to protect the citizens from internal and external foes, from the other citizens and from other countries.
Yeah.
That's really the good legitimate basis for a government, and otherwise the government is illegit.
And I do think it also brings up an interesting question that we should talk about sometime, which is like, do governments have any responsibilities or duties towards citizens of other countries? Because, like, do we in the US, does our government have any duty to protect a citizen of Mexico or a citizen of Canada or a citizen of,
or North Korea?
Yeah, anywhere else? I think that's an interesting libertarian question. And it kind of goes back to
and the answer is, are they our citizen?
Not
No.
legally. And
No.
I think, and it kind of goes back to the whole cosmopolitan idea, like I'm a citizen of the world kind of thing. And I think that, like, obviously from a philosophical, moral, religious point of view, like, yeah, we have a duty to protect people all over the world. It's not that we have any, we shouldn't take any special, we shouldn't necessarily put the interests of of somebody in a different state in the same country above the protection of somebody in North Korea. Anyway, that's a topic for a different day. I think that's,
well, it's an interesting topic because it kind of begs the question of what's a legitimate level of association.
yeah,
And because we talk about cosmopolitanism, basically the entire world is and the entire human race should be looked on to some extent as an organization, an association. You know, we share the same planet. We share the same species identification.
And we're made in the image and likeness of God. Like that's like
Yeah. Well, and there you got that too.
religiously,
You know,
that's the reason that we need to care about every single human, is because we are all made in the image and likeness of God. We are all one human family, daughters and sons of God. And that's why, like, Jesus says a lot.
Well, there's that, but there's also just the practicality of there's a human ecology that the well-being of somebody in Thailand has some degree of effect on my ability to experience well-being also, but it's a very slight degree. So how much effort do we want to put into that? It's the same problem that we are now having, and nationalism seems to trump cosmopolitanism at this point.
Yeah.
Federalism
Religion,
seems to
or
trump,
legally, you mean?
seems to be over eclipsing the more localism.
Yeah.
And I think local associations are clearly more tangible and salient than federal associations.
Yeah.
I have much less in common with somebody named Smokey Piggleton in Hawaii than I do with almost anybody who lives in my neck of the woods.
Well, and it also has
My
nothing.
neck of the woods is my locus of actual potential. This is where I can do something.
Yeah.
I can't do anything for people in Hawaii, no matter to what extent I have some sense of affiliation with them. I don't really have any power to affect it. So it's that, again, it's that responsibility determines our associativity.
Yeah.
The degree to which I can be a responsible citizen is the degree to which I can be a legitimate citizen.
Yeah.
And so I am more a legitimate citizen of my neighborhood than I'm a legitimate citizen of my county, of my state, of my nation, of the world.
Yeah. I do think, first of all, like, you have the ability to affect this is so complicated. You have and this is a little off topic, but I think it's interesting. You have the ability to affect people in Hawaii, as far as you can donate money to them, and you also can make sure that you are, like, because we all share the same world, we don't want to, like, pollute the world necessarily. And I also think that, you know, there are countries where, and businesses that use human slavery and mistreat their people, right? Like, if you look into the Uyghurs in China right now, they are being put in concentration camps. They are being forced to have abortions. They're being forced to, like, do hard manual labor. Like, it's straight up, like, you know, Nazi concentration
Genocide.
2.0.
It's genocidal behavior.
Yeah, and we need to take seriously the idea of, like, our buying practices have the power to say, like, we support certain practices and not support certain practices. Like, we need to.
I'm not gonna buy your T-shirts if you keep killing all these Uyghurs.
Or, but I mean, like, seriously, like, there are certain companies.
No, that is it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the extent of what interaction we can have. We can say, I am not going to be involved in any kind of market interaction that supports you as long as you are being this kind of person. I don't want to have any affiliation. I don't want to even, you know, in any way materially support you
Yeah.
if that's where you're going, if that's how your behavior is going to be. I don't want anything to do with it.
And that gets back to this. It's the same argument for that I made a long time ago on the show about the COVID vaccine. When these vaccines are being produced through abortions,
Yep.
I am going to say I'm not going to, because this is a product that you're asking me to purchase, I'm not going to purchase that product because that was a product that was created as a result of an abortion. Now, there's a lot of discussion around that, and the participation with that evil is very remote and whatever. That's for everybody individually to decide what is the best moral decision in that area.
Yeah.
But it's like the same thing.
It's like buying a t-shirt from China. Are you actually performing an abortion on a Uyghur? No, but you're somewhat even
Allowing
remote.
that to continue.
Yeah, you're somewhat remotely involved in it.
Yeah.
You're providing some sort of material support.
And it's the same thing.
And that's why boycotts are good
Yeah.
methods.
Yeah.
Because it's not actively aggressive. It's not us going in and saying, we will not allow you to treat your people like that.
Yeah.
Because you know what? Every time we do that, guess who's the bad guy?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it doesn't even matter about being the bad guy, but it's just not nearly as effective. I don't think it's, because then you're now taking responsibility for every time the U.S. gets militarily involved in other places, it hardly ever works out. But it's the same thing, talking about that buying power, it's the same thing with supporting what you want to eat as far as eating animals, right? Like, part of my big thing is I don't want to purchase animals that were raised and killed in these factory farms because I don't support their practices. And when I've had so many people be like, yeah, but you're just one person, it doesn't really make a difference, whatever. But it's like, yeah, but
I'm the only person I can make decisions for.
Exactly. I'm only responsible for my purchasing power. And guess what? There's a huge movement now toward veganism, toward smaller supply chains as far as the production of animals, saying we don't support these factory farms. These are not good practices.
And every major social, cultural advancement is made. There's a vanguard of people who are woke first.
Yeah.
And who start to push for a certain kind of like, okay, let's get this out there. Let's start to open this window. What was the name of that window? There's some kind of somebody's window that
Overton window?
Yeah, the Overton window, where there's enough widespread consciousness of the issue that people are then willing to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, 80 years ago, would people have said, "Oh, we ought to make cigarettes illegal and make marijuana legal"? It's like, what?
Yeah.
What? And now it's like, yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Kind of like the plus one theory of knowledge that we were talking again. It's like we are evolving, hopefully in good ways as a society, and getting toward a better, I mean, like, obviously we're devolving in certain ways too. I think that like the legalization of abortion, like obviously people have been aborting their children from the beginning of time, but the legalization of it and the kind of like normalcy of it all, I think that is, it's been getting worse in our country, and like
maybe we're the woke now who is aware that, okay, fetuses are people too.
Yeah, like biology dictates that life.
And other people would say, you know, that's not, it's not true. I've never talked to a fetus. They're not they're not people that I would want to hang out with, so I'm not going to provide them any protections.
Yeah.
And
I call
you
those
know,
people anti-science, by the way. Those are science
well,
denialists.
they're just a little bit more primitive. They're a little, you were talking about
Savages.
the Bible.
Yeah.
I've basically, I'm still in Leviticus and the end of Exodus. Holy crap, those people did not believe in they were talking about, this is how you should treat your human slaves. This is how you should sacrifice animals.
Yeah.
You need to tear them apart,
Yeah.
sprinkle their blood all around, burn up their bodies.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I think that's a little, we look at that as being barbaric. 100 years from now, people are going to look back and say, I can't believe those people were doing things like that they didn't realize how wrong they were to be behaving this way, how wrong they were to be sexist, racist, homophobic, fetophobic.
That's called ageism. Yeah.
Speciesist. There's all kinds of degrees of consciousness that you can have. How it's, look at the shame. Look at the way they used to treat rocks. They used to just take rocks and break them apart as though they had no feelings at all, as though they had no value as an integral rock. That rock had an integral being, and they just tore it apart. They just sacrificed it on their altar for progress.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going.
Yeah.
I may be reducing it to an absurd. I may also be prophetic. I don't know. But I do know that we should always be having these kind of conversations, because these kind of conversations, examining our life, examining our conscience, asking ourselves, am I behaving in the best way that I can? Am I doing harm? Am I being respectful to the things that have value in the world? Am I living with some integrity? Am I living with some honesty? It's a good question. I don't know that I am, because I have a lot of feelings toward animals. And Peter Singer wrote a book about animal ethics. You ever hear of Peter Singer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I read a lot of his stuff in college.
Yeah, he's kind of the standard, I think, for a lot of those arguments. I couldn't argue with a lot of what Peter Singer was saying. Yeah. There's not a really good secular argument for eating animals. Yeah. For saying that animals don't have feelings, that animals don't have sentience, that they don't have reason. And if that's what you're basing it on, obviously there is the religious appeal that we say, okay, God made the animals as part of our food. At some point, he allowed us to start eating animals. Apparently that wasn't true in the garden.
Yeah, it was after the flood.
It was after the flood that we were allowed to start eating animals.
Yeah.
I don't know what changed there. I don't know if that was the hard-heartedness, or it was something we were already doing, so they just said, oh, go ahead. Yeah. Like divorce. What? There's no such thing as divorce. Well, people are doing it. Well, I guess if people are doing it, we're going to have to make rules about it.
It's the same thing.
Making rules about it legitimizes it.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with accusing your wife of sleeping around and being jealous of her. Like, is that a good thing? Obviously not, but like, people were killing their wives over it, so God made a standardized way for us to deal with it, because it's better to have a standardized way that gives some people some dignity, rather than saying, it's the same thing with eating animals. It's the same thing with eating animals. It's like, people used to just eat animals and do whatever they want with it. There are rules in the Bible laid out for how you're supposed to eat animals. you're not supposed to boil a kid in its mother's milk. What does that actually mean? It means two things. First of all, you need to be conscious of what you are eating, because it's not a good thing. Like, I'm gonna cry if I think about this too much, but no, really,
the abominations of it all.
It makes me upset, because it's like, milk is the lifeblood of an animal, and when you take the milk of something that is supposed to give life to a baby animal, and you're using that thing to kill that baby animal, like that is a sacrilege. Like, that is wrong. That is not respecting the dignity of that baby animal. And that's a rule in the Bible. You are not supposed to boil an animal in its milk. You're
also not supposed to tolerate a sorceress.
Yeah.
Did you hear that part in there?
Yeah.
Father Mike didn't say anything about that, but it said something about do not tolerate a sorceress. It's like, wait, what do you mean? what? How do we know if somebody's a sorceress? Oh, we have to use the old Monty Python, if it floats.
Yeah. Yeah, he was just talking about that Monty Python thing yesterday with the whole drinking the water with the dust in it thing.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he brought it up because he was saying the Monty Python thing was kind of the opposite of that, because the Monty Python thing is like, if you are innocent, then you die. But
if you die, then you were innocent.
Yeah.
If you survive the drowning, then you must be guilty, and you must be burned.
Yeah.
Because you float like wood, you have to be burned like wood.
Yeah. But he was saying it's the opposite. That water ritual thing is the opposite, because it only hurts you if you're guilty.
Right.
Which is like interesting. I have so many more things I want to say, but I don't know. I do think that, like, should we read a couple more quotes from this encyclical?
If you wish, as you wish.
This kind of is just a lot of stuff that we've already talked about, but it says a pretty consistent view over the centuries is that animals are not mere things or tools to use as mere means to an end. We're to treat animals with more respect than that. Indeed, the Catechism of the Catholic Church insists that we owe animals kindness, and that we should not cause them to suffer or die without great need. We should be cognizant when we purchase things of the moral implications of our purchase. We have a duty to try to bring about a world which respects the dignity of humans and animals when we buy products. That's exactly what we were talking about. Indeed, this is based on the theological idea taught by both John Paul II and Benedict XVI, that all creation has intrinsic value. Here are some important quotes from Francis making this point. It's not enough, however, to think of different species merely as potential resources to be exploited, while overlooking the fact that they have value in themselves. We must forcefully reject the notion that our being created in God's image and given dominion over the earth justifies absolute domination over other creatures, and creation has an intrinsic value which is independent of its usefulness. Each organism, as a creature of God, is good and admirable in itself. And he says we should try to support small-scale food systems which better respect the dignity of all creatures involved. And then I wrote in all capitals, just as we should support small government which better protects each individual involved. Because I think this is once again getting back to the idea of subsidiarity, which is what you were talking about before. And it's funny because last night, like, everything is so connected. It's weird. Last night I was part of the Zoom call with a bunch of Catholic moms who are all pro medical freedom. And the whole thing was about medical freedom, but they were talking about the idea of subsidiarity. Like,
medical freedom meaning you can't have, like, vaccinations imposed on you, and
like not
sterilizations and lobotomies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was mainly talking about.
I wish I could go back and undo that lobotomy. I would.
It was mainly talking about vaccinations. It was several moms who have had children injured by vaccinations and who are now kind of standing out against the idea of, like, the whole CDC schedule. And I don't want to go into all that because I could talk about that forever. But a huge point that they were making is that we had, and this is getting back to like the duty of taking care of people around us versus people far away from us. We are given responsibility for the people in our family, right? Like I, as a wife, am given responsibility somewhat for my husband, right? Like I have responsibilities.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
He's obviously a capable adult, but I have my main.
He's got free will and adulthood.
Oh, doesn't he?
It's tough. It's tough to pull those strings.
Yeah, and he makes full use of it. But I have a lot of responsibility for my children, right? Like I am given responsibility for them. And they were saying like our doctors have expertise in certain areas and we should defer to them on certain areas, but ultimately we're the ones responsible for our kids. We're the ones like doctors can say one of the examples they were giving is like with vaccine injury, doctors have reasons for either most of the time suggesting that we get vaccinations or not. But if my child is injured from a vaccine, who's going to be the one taking care of them for the rest of their life? It's not going to be the doctor. It's going to be me. So ultimately, I am the one who is responsible for making that decision to say, are the risks associated with this vaccine worth it to give to my child? And this doesn't really even apply necessarily just to vaccines. It applies to everything. I'm the one responsible for feeding my family, for the moral implications of am I gonna purchase factory farmed meat, or am I gonna choose not to do that? I'm the one responsible for saying, educating my children and all the other things that come along with that. I have responsibility for my family. I don't have responsibility for other people's family. Now, I need to care for those people. I need to respect their dignity. But subsidiarity means the people who have the most direct involvement are the people who should be given the most responsibility over those things, right?
And the people upon whom the consequences will fall.
Exactly.
They should be able to be making the choice. Whoever's going to be paying the fiddler ought to be able to call the tune.
Yeah. So I should have more responsibility. I should have more say over what happens to my family than my doctor. I should have more say over what happens to my family than my mayor, than my senator, than my president, than any sort of like global corporation, whatever you want to call it. Like I am the one who's most responsible for them, who has to most deal with the consequences of my decisions or anybody's decisions as they affect my family. So I should have the most say over those things. And that's the idea of subsidiarity. And I think that applies too to this whole animal thing. Like we should try to support smaller farms who are going to actually care about the life and dignity and trying to make that animal's life pain-free as much as possible, rather than these giant corporate factory farms that don't care about animals and are just using them as trying to get the most protein units per square foot, right? Like that's all they care about. They're only using them
at the best, at the optimum, we should do it ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. And that's part of like why hunting, I think, is actually a really good thing.
We should have our own chickens. We should have our own plot of, tomatoes, growing our own tomatoes, knowing that what I put on my tomatoes is water and sunshine.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not DDT. So I know it's not going to cause me to go crazy.
Well, and it's interesting with this
more crazy than I already am. Okay.
There's a whole other aspect of this that we didn't even get into, which is like the genetic engineering of animals. And we didn't even really talk about like animal testing, although it does talk about that in the encyclical, as far as we should.
It kind of goes along, animal testing is reasonable to the extent that it actually provides us valuable knowledge in terms of how how to take better care of humans.
Yeah.
I don't think animal testing of cosmetics is
Should be
ever
allowed.
legitimate.
Yeah, I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so either.
I don't think cosmetics are legitimate. I think if you want to use cosmetics, go ahead.
Yeah.
I clearly don't.
I mean, like shampoo is a cosmetic and soap, but I think that like there are plenty of people who are probably willing to uh, test those things on themselves. And if there's people willing to test those things on themselves, we shouldn't force an animal who is unwilling, who is unable to consent, to make them test this stuff to see how it's going to affect them before we do it on human beings. There's plenty of poor college students who will say, possible side effects. I don't care if you pay me enough. I'll test your weird new soap on myself.
An erection that lasts 12 days? Sign me up.
Like,
Dang.
that would be unpleasant. But no, I do think like
Yeah, in actuality, but the theory is that it's going to be something that's going to be amazing.
that's pretty short-sighted thinking right there.
Like, yeah, 12 days. That ends up being more like a jail sentence than a reward.
Anyway,
Anyway, we probably ought to wrap up.
yeah. So I think that once again, it's a complicated topic of like, should we force animals to be to have like medical experimentation and that kind of stuff? But it's the same. I mean, it's the same thing we do now with fetuses. That's why the whole vaccine thing is an issue in the first place. It's because we are using an aborted fetus to create that vaccine, just like we use dead animals to do medical testing and scientific experimentation and all that kind of stuff. I don't think either of those are right necessarily. I mean, certainly it's not right when you're using an aborted fetus. I think that once again, it can sometimes be justified when you're using an animal, but we got to really be careful about that stuff because we do need to respect the dignity of animals. So
yeah.
I don't know. Ultimately, I do think that I guess if I like in summing it up, I think that only we can be responsible for our actions, and like we are gonna have to answer for the actions that we take someday. I think it's hard because there are some people,
You're gonna reap what you sow.
yeah, there are some people like Jordan Peterson who genuinely he was on an all meat diet because everything else
He believes he needs a lot of meat. Yeah.
And it's like there are probably some people who genuinely, at least for a time, maybe need to eat meat to function. There are some people in other
Eskimo diets are almost entirely meat based.
Yeah, and that's actually why a lot of those people who are doing the carnivore diet, that they say like obviously it can be a healthy diet because there are Eskimos who like literally basically subsist on meat and blubber, right?
Right.
So.
And they drink the blood. They drink the blood. They eat the meat. They wear the skins.
Yeah.
And they do not kill what they don't need.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, in summary, you just said, in summary, we're all responsible for our own. In summary, my summary for the whole animal rights thing is, if you don't take a religious point of view and say that because man is made in God's image, so we've got certain rights, we're in a hierarchy above others. I think, otherwise you're being disingenuous when you say, oh, just because our species, I favor our species to the extent that I'm willing to enslave and cannibalize other species, not cannibalize, eat.
But, yeah.
I'm willing to eat other mammals. I'm willing to eat other things because I don't feel a kinship with them. It doesn't matter what you feel.
Yeah.
People feel all kinds of ways about other people. it doesn't give them a right to treat them in a way that you know, enslaves them
Yeah.
or you know, eats them.
People have more negative feelings toward their opposite political party than they do toward their dog or toward a lot of animals. So like if you're just going on feelings, that's when you start getting into concentration camp territory, which is what we see all over the world. Because when
You mean correction camps for Trump supporters? People who need to be re
educated.
they need correction.
Yeah.
They need to find out where their thinking has gone wrong and how they can get in line with
Rationality, reason.
reality.
Yeah. So I don't know. I hope you glean something from this conversation.
From this mess.
I don't know. I'm still pretty undecided. The one thing that I do know is that we have a duty to care for all of God's creation, whether it is rocks or trees or plants or animals or other people. We have a duty to care for all of those things.
For the air.
Yeah, and the air and everything. And we need to take that seriously, and we need to try to respect life and bring about as little harm as possible. That is what I know. So all the rest of it is, you know, up in the air, I guess.
And we all have to make our decisions about how we're going to be integral with our values. You know, am I living in a way that's integral with my values? If I've got, you know, 500 pairs of shoes, 500 pairs of leather shoes in my closet that basically represents hundreds of animals having to die in order for me to have these things that I'm not wearing.
Yeah.
You know, am I being good? Am I loving the good, doing the right, and walking humbly with my Lord? That's everybody's got to examine their own conscience and decide about that. And I think it's good to be really harsh with yourself. It's good to occasionally sprinkle ashes on your bread to make sure that you're not making a god of your own stomach and your own desires, because it's easy to slip into, because I like it and because I want it, I'm going to assume it's right. If it feels good, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Danger, the road to hell.
Save the good feelings.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.
God bless everybody.
Bye.